Welcome to the Burnout Show, and in this video I'm going to show you how to do an oil change on a 2014 Honda Accord Sport. This is a very simple process to change your oil and something that you could do in your driveway with very little tools. So like I said, I'm going to walk step by step on how to do exactly that. One thing to note is if you're not sure where to bring the old oil, there's actually lots of parts stores out there that are now taking the old oil for free in order to dispose of it properly. So if you're doing this at home in your driveway, definitely take note of that. The first thing that you're going to want to do is pull the hood lever inside near the driver's seat. It'll be by your left foot when you sit in the car, and you'll just want to pull that lever to make sure that the hood is loose. From here, we're going to lift up the hood and loosen the oil filler cap. What loosening the oil cap does is it actually allows the oil to drain out of the car much easier because it provides air in the top so that the rest of the oil can kind of come out the oil drain plug. At this point, once you've loosened that, you can actually get the car off the ground. So whether you're using a jack or jack stands, as well as maybe car ramps, or today we have a lift, however it may be, make sure that you're getting the car off the ground, and I'll show you where the drain plug is. Another important thing to note is you want to make sure that you're jacking up the car in the correct spot. So if you're not sure exactly where to jack up the car, you want to make sure that you research where on each side of the car or each tire. You want to make sure that you don't hurt the car while trying to get it off the ground. So once the car is off of the ground, now it's time to loosen the oil drain plug. Now there's a couple things to note right before you loosen that bolt there. And one is if you just drove the car for a long distance, this oil is actually going to be very hot. So you don't want to loosen that because if oil ends up dripping down your arm, you can burn your entire arm because it's that hot. Secondly, if the car has been sitting for so long that it hasn't run the oil through the system of the engine, it's actually good to fire up the engine for about 10 seconds, let the car idle if possible, and then turn it off, and that ultimately will allow the oil to drain out better. So once again, if you just drove the car, let it cool down. However, if you haven't driven the car for a while, fire it up for about 10 seconds. What that will do is allow you to not burn yourself and get as much oil out as possible. This is the oil drain plug here. So what you're going to want to do is grab some pan or an oil pan or something like that. In the driveway, I normally use a Bunsen burner pan, the type of pans that you cook with. But today we actually have a lift with an actual oil catch pan. So this is a 17mm bolt, and it will actually crack open fairly easily. But what I like to do is actually double up on the wrenches. You can see I'll put one wrench on there and then actually grab a second wrench, and then I will pull this way, which would be turning the bolt to the left, and what I would call crack it loose. Now, once you have it cracked loose, it won't start gushing oil immediately. However, as you turn it off, the oil will obviously come out. So you want to make sure that you have your pan ready. Another thing that's important to note is when you pull off the oil drain plug, there will actually be what looks like a little washer there. You can see it maybe turning a little bit. That actually serves as a gasket when you're tightening down the bolt. So you want to make sure that that stays with your bolt and doesn't stay on the engine or accidentally fall in your pan, because you're going to want that on there when you go to put the bolt back on. What I'm doing right now is just cleaning the oil off of the bolt and just allowing this to drain for maybe a couple minutes. Another couple things that you want to do before you actually take off the old oil filter, I like to add in the mileage, the current mileage of the car, as well as today's date on the back of the filter. That way, either the customer or the next mechanic who does the oil change can actually know when the filter was last changed. Another thing that's important to note is there's a little plastic cover on the oil filters, or at least most of them, and you're going to want to take that plastic cover off. If you have it on there, it'll actually prevent the filter from filtering oil, which is quite literally the opposite of what you want it to do. So like I said, just peel off this plastic piece. That's something that you're not going to want on there. Another important thing to notice is there's a little rubber seal that goes around this filter. Now, when you're pulling off the old filter, you're going to want to make sure that that seal comes off with the old filter because there's a new seal on the new filter. Secondly, in order for this filter to tighten down appropriately, you're going to actually want to take some old oil like that on your finger, and you're going to want to rub it right around this rubber seal. It actually seems a little weird, but that will allow the filter to tighten down in a more even motion rather than the rubber sticking and having it jolt when you're tightening in the new filter. So once you've added a little bit of oil here, maybe drained as much as you could out of the oil drain pan, now it's time to put back in the plug, and then we'll take care of the filter, which is right up front. When you go to tighten the oil drain plug on the oil pan, you're going to want to just use one wrench this time, and you're going to want to get it nice and snug. So you can see I have it pretty much tight there, and I'm just going to give it a little little bit extra. This is something that you don't want to put your full strength into, because if you put your full strength on a wrench, you'll actually just strip that oil pan. And at that point, your oil is going to start leaking everywhere, and this oil pan needs to be replaced. So like I said, just be aware of it. You want it snug. It will actually get tight over time because of the warm oil. Just get it nice and snug, maybe a little extra push, and that's totally fine. Now it's time to take off the old oil filter. So you might actually be able to loosen the oil filter just with your hand. If you can get your hand up there and just spin it to the left, it is threaded on. So whatever direction it's on, you're gonna kind of want to thread it to the left that way. Now, another thing that you could use is an oil filter wrench, which is what this is right here. And that will ultimately grab onto the oil filter. And then if you kind of clamp it tight like I'm doing there and then spin it to the left, then it will loosen the oil filter. So I actually had to get this one on just a little bit there and then spin it to the left accordingly, just a little bit. And then from there, you should be able to grab with your hands. Once again, if the oil's hot, this is also gonna be hot on your hands. However, you wanna make sure it's cooled down and you have your oil pan underneath, because it will start dripping down. It's also important to note that the oil filter is actually filled with oil. So on this Honda Accord specifically, it's at a diagonal angle up, and the filter is almost like a cup. So it has a certain amount of oil inside it. So when you bring the filter down, you're gonna kind of want to tip it into your pan, because once again, it has some oil in it. After you've taken the old oil out and drained most of the oil, you're actually all good to put the pan away. And now it's time to put in the new filter. And once again, you can kind of just spin that on and it threads up just the same. Now, it's also important to note that this is something that you don't want to over tighten either. Although I needed a wrench to get it off, you actually don't want to use a wrench to put it on. You kind of just want to grab it and get it as tight and snug as you can with probably one hand, maybe add a second hand at the last second. However, once again, you want it snug. If it's snug enough and make sure it's on the thread correctly, that's totally fine. It's good to go. Now you can lower down the car and add some oil in. After you've tightened the oil drain plug and the oil filter, now it's time to come back up to the top of the engine and add the new oil in. On this 2.4 liter engine for the Honda Accord, we're actually using synthetic oil, which is 0 weight 20. So you want to make sure that you have 0 weight 20 when pouring it into this car. Once again, that's the full synthetic that we have today. And this will actually take 4.4 or 4.5 quarts. So make sure that you're adding the correct amount when you go to pour it in, because you don't want to overfill it with too much oil and you want to make sure it doesn't have too little oil either. So at this point, you're actually good to grab a funnel and put it in the top where the oil fill cap went, and then you're good to start pouring the oil. After you've poured in all of the oil that needs to go into the car, then you're actually good to go. So you can remove the funnel, tighten the oil filler cap, and then it's actually a good idea to go inside the car, run the car for about 10 seconds, then turn off the car, come back out here and check your oil dipstick. Like I said before, that makes sure that the amount of oil that you put in is correct. So run it for 10 seconds and come check it. You can also check it multiple times to double check. At this point, you're all set to go. You've completely changed the oil in a 2014 Honda Accord. Be sure to check out the channel for much more videos like this and at-home repairs, as well as some entertaining content that we have on here as well. We post pretty much twice a week and about all different types of cars and things to do with cars. So be sure to check us out here on The Burnout Show. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this helped, and we'll see you next time.